On August 11, 1942, United States Patent 2.223.7 is filed with the Patent Office in Washington, D.C. The application describes a secret communication system designed to guide torpedoes by radio control while rendering the guidance signal immune to enemy jamming. The inventors are listed as Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil. The filing attracts no attention. The Navy classifies it immediately and does nothing with it. Hedy Lamarr is better known as Hedy Lamarr. At the time of filing, she is among the most photographed women in America, earning $4,000 per week at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, starring opposite Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. George Antheil is an avant-garde composer, famous or infamous for his 1926 Ballet Mécanique, which called for 16 synchronized player piano sirens and an airplane propeller. Together, these two have solved a problem that has stymied military engineers since radio-controlled weapons first entered development: how to prevent an enemy from simply jamming the control signal and rendering the weapon useless. The Navy thanks them for their patriotism. The invention goes into a file drawer. It will remain there for 2 decades. This is the story of how a self-taught inventor and a modernist composer created the foundation for technologies that would eventually underpin modern wireless communication, GPS, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, and how the U.S. military, in the middle of a war it was losing, rejected a solution to one of its most pressing tactical problems, because it came from a woman whose job was to look beautiful on screen. Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler is born in Vienna on November 9, 1914. Her father, Emil, is a bank director. Her mother, Gertrude, is a pianist from Budapest. The city is the capital of an empire that has 18 months left to exist. Hedy grows up in the wreckage of the Austro-Hungarian collapse, in a Vienna that remains a cultural capital, even as it becomes a political backwater. She is by all accounts exceptionally beautiful. She is also curious about how things work. At age 5, she disassembles and reassembles a music box to understand its mechanism. Her father takes her on walks through Vienna, explaining how streetcars operate, how traffic lights are synchronized, how the city's infrastructure functions. These walks imprint. Decades later, she will tell interviewers that her father taught her to look beneath the surface of things to see the mechanical reality under the cosmetic appearance. At 16, she enrolls in acting classes with Max Reinhardt. At 17, she appears in her first film. At 18, she stars in Ecstasy, a Czech production directed by Gustav Machati. The film includes a nude swimming scene and a sequence suggesting female orgasm. It is banned in the United States and condemned by the Pope. It also makes Hedy Lamarr internationally notorious. In 1933, she marries Friedrich Mandl. He is 43, she is 19. Mandl is the 3rd richest man in Austria, an arms manufacturer who owns Hirtenberger Patronenfabrik, which produces munitions for the Austrian army and increasingly for Nazi Germany. Mandl is Jewish by birth but Catholic by conversion. This does not protect him from Hitler's racial laws. It does not stop him from selling weapons to Mussolini's Italy and to the Wehrmacht. The marriage is a cage. Mandl is obsessively jealous. He attempts to purchase every copy of Ecstasy in existence. He monitors Hedy's movements, controls her social contacts, forbids her film career. He also hosts dinner parties. Generals attend, engineers attend, weapons developers attend. Mandl's dining room becomes an informal seminar on military technology. The beautiful wife sits at the table, silent and decorative. She listens, she remembers. Conversations center on Austria's precarious position between Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. They discuss aerial bombing, anti-aircraft systems, torpedo technology. German engineers describe the problem of radio-controlled weapons. The control signal can be jammed, rendering the weapon unguided. They discuss frequency modulation, signal strength interference patterns. Hedy Lamarr sits at these dinners for 4 years. She absorbs everything. By 1937, she understands that Austria will be absorbed by Germany. She understands that her husband's business connections will not protect him or her. She plans her escape with care. On a night in September 1937, she drugs her maid with a sedative, puts on the maid's clothing, walks out of Mandl's villa, and boards a train to Paris. She is 23 years old. She takes no money. She takes the jewelry she is wearing. She takes what she has learned. In London, she contacts Louis B. Mayer, who is touring Europe scouting talent. Mayer offers her $125 per week. She refuses. On the ship to New York, she negotiates. By the time they dock, she has $500 per week and a 7-year contract. Meyer changes her name. Hedwig Kiesler becomes Hedy Lamarr, the surname borrowed from the silent film actress Barbara Lamarr. It is September 1938. Hitler annexes Austria 3 weeks after her arrival in the United States. Friedrich Mandl flees to Argentina. Hedy Lamarr never returns to Vienna. Her first American film is Algiers opposite Charles Boyer. It opens in July 1938. She is immediately typecast, the exotic European beauty, mysterious and untouchable. The camera loves her. She photographs like a statue come to life with bone structure that creates its own lighting. MGM puts her in 18 films in 6 years. She learns English phonetically, memorizing dialogue she doesn't fully understand. She earns $4,000 per week by 1942, extraordinary money for the era. She is also bored. In her home on Hedgerow Lane in Beverly Hills, she sets up a drafting table and acquires engineering references. She designs an improved traffic signal. She develops a bouillon cube that dissolves quickly in water, an idea intended to improve field rations. She proposes adding a carbonation mechanism to the bottom of a drinking glass, turning water into soda on demand. The ideas are imaginative but impractical. She lacks formal training. She knows this. She reads obsessively books on applied physics, mechanical engineering, radio technology. The war is going badly. By late 1940, Britain is being starved by U-boat attacks on Atlantic convoys. German submarines sink 585 Allied ships in 1940, totaling 2.9 million gross register tons. The Royal Navy responds with depth charges, but finding a submerged submarine in the North Atlantic is nearly impossible. The Germans attack on the surface at night using their diesel engines to outrun escorts. The Allied solution is obvious: sink the U-boats from the air. But aerial torpedoes are unreliable, and radio-controlled torpedoes, which could theoretically be guided onto target after release, are too vulnerable to jamming. Hedy Lamarr understands this problem. She has heard German engineers discuss it. At one of Mandl's dinner parties, she heard them describe the core vulnerability: a radio-controlled weapon receives instructions on a single frequency. An enemy needs only to broadcast noise on that frequency to sever the connection between controller and weapon. The solution is simple, in concept impossible in execution: change the frequency constantly so fast that the enemy cannot track it. But how do you synchronize the transmitter and receiver? How do you ensure both switch to the same frequency at the same instant, thousands of times per second? She thinks about player pianos. George Antheil is 40 years old in 1940, a composer who has abandoned the avant-garde for Hollywood film scores. He is also improbably an advice columnist, writing an astrology column and a relationship advice column under the pen name Agony Aunt for the Friday section of the Los Angeles Times. In August 1940, Hedy Lamarr contacts him. She has read his columns. She wants his help with a problem: how to make her breasts appear larger without surgery. Antheil suggests hormone therapy. They become friends. They discover shared interest: music, mechanics, the war. Antheil is desperate to contribute. He is too old for combat, too American-born to have insight into European affairs, but he has studied glandular systems for his advice columns and has become convinced that endocrine secretions affect behavior. He writes a paper titled The Glandular Explanation of History, arguing that political leaders' decisions can be traced to hormonal imbalances. It is pseudoscience, but it demonstrates his belief that complex systems can be understood mechanically. In December 1940, Hedy describes the jamming problem. She explains frequency hopping, the idea that a transmitter and receiver could change frequencies in lockstep, jumping across the spectrum too quickly for an enemy to follow. Antheil immediately grasps the concept. He also sees the problem: synchronization. How do you make two separate devices, one in an aircraft, one in a torpedo, traveling through water, change frequencies at exactly the same moment over and over without losing sync? Antheil proposes using player piano rolls. The ballet mécanique had required 16 player pianos to play in exact synchronization. Antheil had solved that problem in 1926 using perforated paper rolls, each hole triggering a specific note at a specific time. The same mechanism could trigger frequency changes. Install identical piano rolls in the transmitter and receiver. Start them simultaneously. Each hole in the roll represents a frequency. As the roll advances, the frequency changes. Both devices hop through the spectrum in perfect lockstep. The enemy hears only fragmentary pulses on individual frequencies, too brief to jam. The torpedo receives a coherent signal. They work through the details over 6 months. The system will use 88 frequencies, the number of keys on a piano. The roll will advance at a rate that changes frequency several times per second. The transmitter will be in the aircraft. The receiver will be in the torpedo, waterproofed and miniaturized. When the pilot releases the torpedo, both piano rolls start simultaneously. The torpedo becomes unjammable. On June 10, 1941, they file a patent application with the assistance of Antheil's patent lawyer. The application is 32 pages, including technical diagrams showing the piano roll mechanism, the frequency hopping sequence, and the control system architecture. The invention is titled Secret Communication System. The abstract states, "By employment of our system, it becomes exceedingly difficult for anyone not familiar with the transmitted signals to detect the message." This is an understatement. Without an identical piano roll, synchronized to the exact starting position, the signal is unbreakable. The patent is granted on August 11, 1942 as U.S. Patent 2-292-387. Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil assign the patent to the U.S. government. They ask for no payment. They want only to help win the war. The National Inventors Council receives the patent. This body, established in 1940, evaluates civilian inventions for military application. The Council forwards Patent 2-29387 to the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance with a recommendation for development. The Bureau of Ordnance reviews it. They conclude it is impractical. The official objection is size. A piano roll mechanism, even miniaturized, is too large to fit inside a torpedo. The Mark 13 aerial torpedo, the standard U.S. Navy airborne torpedo in 1942, is 13.5 feet long and weighs 216 pounds. Every inch of internal space is allocated to warhead fuel and guidance mechanisms. There's no room for a piano roll player. The unofficial objection is source. The inventors are a movie actress and an avant-garde composer. The Bureau of Ordnance is staffed by Annapolis graduates and career engineers. They do not take seriously a patent filed by civilians with no military experience, no engineering degrees, and no security clearances. The fact that one of the inventors is a woman, and a woman famous for being beautiful, makes the dismissal easier. A Navy engineer writes to the National Inventors Council on October 1942, "The proposed system is both complicated and impractical. We believe more practical methods of achieving similar results are available." The letter does not specify what these methods are. Patent 2-292-387 is classified and filed. Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil are thanked for their patriotism. The file goes into storage. The U.S. Navy continues to lose ships to U-boats. In 1942, German submarines sink 160 Allied vessels, totaling 6.2 million gross register tons. This is the worst year of the war for convoy losses. The Allies sink 85 U-boats in the same period. The exchange rate is unsustainable. Radio-controlled torpedoes remain vulnerable to jamming. The Navy does not implement frequency hopping. Hedy Lamarr does not know her invention has been rejected. She assumes it is being developed. She continues her war work through other channels. She uses her celebrity. On September 21, 1942, she appears at a war bond rally in Philadelphia. The concept is simple. Men purchase war bonds. She provides kisses. The event raises $17 million in a single day. She repeats the performance in 16 cities. By war's end, she has helped raise $25 million for the war effort, approximately $400 million in 2024 dollars. She also continues inventing. She develops a flare that burns longer and brighter, intended for signaling downed pilots at sea. She designs a modification to aircraft wings to reduce drag. None of these inventions are adopted. She is a movie star. That is her value. The flares go untested. The wing design is not reviewed. She continues making films. George Antheil returns to composing. He writes film scores for Spectre of the Rose and Knock on Any Door. He also writes an autobiography, Bad Boy of Music, published in 1945. The book describes his friendship with Ezra Pound, his battles with critics, his avant-garde experiments. It does not mention Patent 2-292-387. The invention is classified. He cannot discuss it. The war ends without frequency-hopping technology being deployed. The U-boat threat is defeated through more escorts, more aircraft, more depth charges, and through cryptography. The breaking of the Enigma code allows Allied commanders to route convoys around wolf packs. By 1943, U-boat losses exceed replacement rates. By 1944, the Atlantic is an Allied lake. Radio-controlled torpedoes remain experimental, unused in combat. Patent 2-292-387 remains classified until 1957. By then it has expired. Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil receive no compensation. The patent enters the public domain. Engineers begin to notice it. In 1957, the Sylvania Electronic Systems Division is working on a secure communication system for naval vessels. An engineer named Harold Beveridge reviews expired patents for relevant technologies. He finds patent 2-292-387. He recognizes immediately what the Navy missed. In 1942, frequency hopping provides not just jam resistance, but also security. A message transmitted across 88 frequencies in rapid sequence cannot be intercepted without knowing the hopping pattern. Even if the enemy records the transmission, they capture only fragments. Beveridge proposes adapting the concept for the blade system, a secure ship-to-ship communication network. The adaptation removes the piano roll mechanism and replaces it with electronic circuits. The underlying principle remains identical: synchronize frequency changes, defeat jamming and interception. Sylvania develops the system. The Navy adopts it. By 1962, Blades is operational on major surface vessels. The technology spreads. In 1963, U.S. military communication systems begin incorporating frequency hopping as a standard countermeasure against Soviet jamming. The method evolves. Instead of 88 frequencies, systems use hundreds. Instead of mechanical synchronization, they use electronic clocks and pseudo-random number generators. The pattern becomes unpredictable even to sophisticated adversaries. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, U.S. forces use frequency hopping to coordinate movements while Soviet intelligence intercepts nothing usable. By 1969, frequency hopping is standard in military radios. The ANPRC-77 radio issued to infantry units in Vietnam incorporates basic frequency hopping capability. The technology prevents North Vietnamese forces from jamming American communications or triangulating transmitter positions. The PRC-77 is bulky. It weighs 13.5 pounds with battery, but it works. Soldiers can communicate without fear of interception. The invention Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil created in 1941 becomes part of the standard infantry loadout 28 years later. None of the documentation credits Lamarr or Antheil. Patent 2-292-387 is mentioned in technical papers as prior art, a predecessor to modern spread spectrum technology, but the inventors' names disappear from the narrative. Military historians write about the development of secure communications without mentioning the actress and the composer who invented the foundational concept. The invention becomes orphaned from its creators. In the 1970s, the technology escapes military applications. Engineers developing cellular telephone systems recognize that frequency hopping solves the problem of channel congestion. A single frequency can carry only one conversation. But if phones hop across multiple frequencies, many conversations can share the same spectrum without interference. The first commercial spread spectrum systems appear in 1977, used for secure corporate communications. In 1985, the Federal Communications Commission opens certain radio frequency bands for unlicensed use, provided devices employ spread spectrum technology to minimize interference. This decision enables the development of cordless phones, wireless computer networks, and eventually Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. All of these technologies use variants of frequency hopping spread spectrum. By 2000, billions of devices worldwide are using descendants of the system Lamarr and Antheil invented. None of this compensates the inventors. Patent 2-292-387 expired in 1959. The technology it described entered the public domain. Lamarr receives no royalties from military communications, no licensing fees from cellular networks, no payments from wireless internet. She continues acting until 1958, then retires. She lives on savings, residual payments, and occasional royalties from her films. In the 1960s and 1970s, she is largely forgotten. George Antheil dies on February 12, 1959 in New York City. He is 58. His obituaries focus on his music, particularly ballet mécanique. None mention his patent. He dies believing his invention was rejected and forgotten, unaware that military engineers are at that moment adapting his concept for operational systems. Hedy Lamarr lives in increasing isolation. She undergoes multiple cosmetic surgeries attempting to preserve her appearance. The surgeries are not successful. She becomes reclusive, living in a series of small apartments in Miami and later in Castleberry, Florida. She rarely grants interviews. When she does, journalists ask about her film career, her beauty, her 6 marriages. They do not ask about her inventions. On March 12, 1997, Hedy Lamarr receives a telephone call. The caller is Robert Steele, representing the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a digital rights organization. The foundation has decided to honor Lamarr with its Pioneer Award, recognizing her contribution to wireless communication technology. Lamarr is 82 years old. She has not appeared in public in decades. She declines to attend the ceremony. She accepts the award by telephone. The award brings attention. Technology publications begin investigating her role in developing spread-spectrum technology. Journalists discover Patent 2292387. They find the 1942 correspondence from the Navy rejecting the invention. They interview engineers who worked on blades in later systems. A narrative emerges: the beautiful actress, who is secretly a genius whose invention was dismissed because of her gender and celebrity, whose technology eventually changed the world. In 1998, she becomes the first woman to receive the Bulby Nass Spirit of Achievement Award, a technology industry honor. In 2000, she is inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. These honors come late. She is in her 80s, living alone, largely deaf, unwilling to be photographed. She tells an interviewer, "I never knew what to do with myself. I was always curious, but nobody took me seriously." On January 19, 2000, Hedy Lamarr dies in Castleberry, Florida. She is 85. Her obituaries lead with her film career: Algiers, White Cargo, Samson, and Delilah. Most mention, usually in the final paragraphs, that she co-invented technology used in modern wireless communication. The invention is treated as a curious footnote, an unexpected achievement from a woman whose primary significance was her beauty. This assessment is backward. Patent 2292387 describes a method for synchronous frequency hopping across multiple channels to prevent jamming and interception. This concept, called spread spectrum technology, is the foundation of modern wireless communication. Every cell phone uses a variant of frequency hopping to share spectrum with other phones. Every Wi-Fi router uses spread spectrum to transmit data without interference. GPS satellites use spread spectrum to broadcast positioning signals that cannot be jammed. Bluetooth devices use frequency hopping to prevent interference from other wireless devices operating nearby. The global wireless communication market generates $1.7 trillion annually. An estimated 15 billion devices use spread spectrum technology. The concept Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil invented in 1941, 2 civilians working in a Beverly Hills living room with no formal engineering training, is embedded in the infrastructure of modern civilization. Your smartphone uses their invention every time you make a call, send a message, or connect to the internet. The U.S. Navy, which rejected the invention in 1942 as impractical, now uses spread spectrum technology in virtually all its communication systems. Modern torpedoes, including the Mark 48 ADCAP, use acoustic homing rather than radio control, but when radio control is necessary for unmanned underwater vehicles. For instance, the communication link employs spread spectrum frequency hopping to resist jamming. The technology the Navy dismissed is now standard in the service's operational doctrine. The rejection was not merely a bureaucratic error. It reveals systemic assumptions about who could contribute to military technology. Hedy Lamarr was famous, female, and foreign-born. These facts disqualified her in the eyes of military engineers who could not imagine that a movie actress might understand radio technology better than they did. The fact that she had spent 4 years listening to Austrian and German weapons engineers discuss these exact problems, that she had educated herself in the technical details, that she had partnered with someone who understood synchronization mechanisms, none of this mattered. She was decorative. Decorative people do not invent weapon systems. George Antheil faced different prejudices. He was known as a provocateur, a composer who wrote deliberately shocking music. His ballet mécanique had caused riots. He wrote advice columns. He proposed theories about glands affecting political decisions. None of this suggested serious engineering capability. The fact that synchronizing 16-player pianos required solving precisely the kind of timing problems that plagued radio-controlled weapons was not obvious to evaluators who saw only an eccentric artist. The U.S. military in 1942 was losing the Battle of the Atlantic. German U-boats were sinking cargo ships faster than American shipyards could replace them. Britain was weeks away from starvation on multiple occasions. The need for better anti-submarine weapons was desperate. And in a file cabinet in Washington, a patent sat unused, a solution to a critical problem rejected because its inventors did not fit the expected profile of weapons developers. Hedy Lamarr made 49 films. She was nominated for no Academy Awards. Critics praised her beauty and noted her limited range as an actress. This assessment was accurate. She was stiff on screen, her performances constrained by the language barrier and by typecasting. Her directors used her as a visual object, a face to photograph. She was very good at being photographed. She was less good at acting. But she was an inventor, not a casual tinkerer, not a celebrity with a hobby. She identified real technical problems and developed practical solutions. The traffic signal she designed was impractical, but the thinking behind it was sound. The bouillon cube idea was impractical, but it demonstrated understanding of field logistics. The carbonated glass idea was impractical, but it showed creative thinking about chemical processes. The frequency hopping system was practical. It solved a real problem. It worked. The only barrier to its adoption was institutional prejudice. In later years, interviewers asked Hedy Lamarr why she had never pursued engineering as a career. She replied that it had never occurred to her that it was a career. She had been beautiful, so she became an actress. That was what beautiful women did. The fact that she was also intelligent, curious, and technically capable was irrelevant to a studio system that valued her appearance and nothing else. This was not unique to Hollywood. The U.S. military during World War II employed thousands of women in technical roles, code breakers at Arlington Hall, human computers calculating ballistic trajectories, engineers testing aircraft components. These women were paid less than men, given less credit, and excluded from decision-making roles. After the war, most were pushed out of their positions to make room for returning servicemen. Their contributions were forgotten or minimized. Hedy Lamarr was wealthier and more famous than most women of her era, but she faced the same structural barriers. Her technical contributions were dismissed because they came from a woman. When those contributions were finally recognized decades later, they were treated as anomalies, surprising achievements from someone whose real identity was actress and beauty icon. The correct framing is inverted. Hedy Lamarr was an inventor who briefly worked as an actress, because that was the only profession available to a beautiful woman in the 1930s and 1940s. Her films are largely forgotten. Samson and Delilah is occasionally revived as a Camp Algiers, appears on lists of film noir precursors, but none are considered masterpieces. Her invention is embedded in the technological infrastructure of the 21st century. Every person reading this uses her work daily. Today, the Hedy Lamarr Festival takes place annually in Austria, celebrating women in STEM fields. In 2014, on what would have been her 100th birthday, Google honored her with a Google Doodle depicting her face alongside a frequency-hopping diagram. Numerous scholarships and awards bear her name, encouraging young women to pursue engineering careers. These memorials are appropriate, but they also obscure a darker truth. Hedy Lamarr received recognition only after she was dead, only after her beauty had faded, only after she could no longer challenge the assumptions that had marginalized her. During her lifetime, she was valued for her appearance. Her intelligence was treated as surprising, even suspicious. A beautiful woman could not also be technically capable. The two qualities seemed mutually exclusive to the men who controlled film studios, military procurement, and the broader culture. This assumption cost lives. If the Navy had adopted frequency-hopping technology in 1942, Allied ships might have been able to coordinate anti-submarine operations more effectively. Radio-controlled torpedoes might have entered service years earlier. The Battle of the Atlantic might have been shortened. These are counterfactuals impossible to prove, but the logic is sound. A rejected invention cannot save lives. The broader cost is incalculable. How many other technical solutions were dismissed because their inventors did not fit expected profiles? How many inventions sat in file drawers because the person proposing them was female, foreign, or otherwise outside the military-industrial establishment? The U.S. won World War II despite rejecting Hedy Lamarr's invention, but victory might have come sooner and at lower cost if institutional prejudices had not blinded military planners to solutions from unexpected sources. Patent 2292387 now resides in the National Inventors Hall of Fame archive in Alexandria, Virginia. The document is available online, digitized and searchable. Anyone can read the technical specifications, examine the diagrams, and see how two civilians with no formal engineering training solved a problem that had stumped military experts. The patent is a monument to wasted opportunity, to institutional failure, and to the eventual triumph of a good idea over the prejudices that tried to bury it. Hedy Lamarr's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame is located at 6241 Hollywood Boulevard. It honors her contributions to motion pictures. There's no separate marker for her technical achievements, no plaque explaining that she invented the technology that makes smartphones work. Tourists photograph the star, unaware they are standing on a memorial to someone who changed their lives in ways that have nothing to do with movies. George Antheil's grave is in Riverview Cemetery in Trenton, New Jersey. The headstone identifies him as a composer. It does not mention Patent 2292387. He died believing his invention was forgotten, unaware that it would eventually become one of the most consequential technological developments of the 20th century. They deserve better. They deserve to see their invention adopted, to know it worked, to receive credit during their lifetimes. Instead, they were thanked for their patriotism and dismissed. The military they tried to help rejected their contribution because it came from the wrong people. This was not an accident. It was a choice repeated across thousands of similar cases, reflecting assumptions about who could contribute to the war effort and whose ideas deserved serious consideration. The technology won in the end. Frequency hopping spread spectrum is everywhere now, indispensable and ubiquitous. But Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil are largely forgotten, their names unknown to the billions of people using their invention. The beautiful actress, who was also an inventor, has been reduced to a trivia question. Did you know she invented something important? The specifics are vague, the technical details ignored, the magnitude of the achievement understated. She invented the foundation of modern wireless communication. She did it in 1941. The military ignored her. The world eventually caught up. This is not a feel-good story about vindication. This is a story about institutional failure, about talent wasted, about lives potentially lost because good ideas were rejected for bad reasons. On your phone, in your car, and every wireless device you own, Hedy Lamarr's invention is working. The frequency hops. The signal stays clear. The message gets through. She made that possible. Remember her for that.